Hi, everyone. It's Danielle from Fine Gardening here. Listen, I know that you guys probably hate ads at the start of a podcast episode as much as I do, but trust me, this is a good one. Right, Carol?
That's right. We wanted to let everyone know about something pretty amazing that will be happening in April. We're going to be hosting an online lecture series on sustainability in the garden, and you can participate. The courses will feature 4 experts from around the country talking about sustainable garden design, native plants, trees and shrubs for pollinators and birds.
Oh, yeah. And there's this one class that's called The Secret Life of Soil. I just got to preview that one, and oh my goodness, it's so incredible. Who knew soil was that cool? The best part is these classes are on demand, but then we'll be having live Q&A sessions with the presenters each week.
There's so much more to explain, but you can just go to finegardening.com to find out more about the Sustainability in the Garden lecture series. The classes will be available starting in April, just in time for Earth Day.
Oh, and we should probably mention that we are limiting the number of participants. So if you are interested, go to finegardening.com today to sign up. And welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who just love plants.
Just not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins. I'm the associate editor at Fine Gardening Magazine.
Hey, y'all. And I'm Danielle Sherry, and I'm the executive editor here at FG. And Carol, very seldom do we tape a podcast at the exact moment when outside it is the perfect topic that matches up with the perfect weather pattern we are having. And today we're talking about winter interest, and looking out at your window here I can see winter interest. It is snowing.
Yes, we got a couple inches of winter interest.
It's awesome. I know. I was so thrilled when I woke up this morning. I'm like, hey, I thought it was going to be rain, but no, it's snow. So here we are. We are entering into February here in New England. We haven't really had all that much of a winter thus far. We have had a couple inches here or there, but definitely not buried in snow. So I don't know about you, but I've actually been able to appreciate some winter interest because it's not 0 degrees outside and 5 feet of snow. I've actually noticed, hey, I got plants that have winter interest out there.
That's right. Yes. Me too. Yeah, it's been a nice winter. I love southern New England winters. Having grown up in Vermont, you guys have it pretty easy down here.
Yeah, we definitely do. And even for Connecticut, it's been kind of a mild winter. But Vermont. What serves as winter interest in Vermont?
Snowbanks. No, I mean they grow all kinds of conifers and things that we grow down here, but when you're in zone 4, your options are a little more limited.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. Immediately what popped to mind for me was conifers. What about you?
Yes. Yeah. Because of course they are evergreen. Most of them, they look good all year long. And we think of them around the holidays, but of course, there are other things that have great winter interest.
Yeah. And it took me a little bit more to rev myself up into, all right, what have I got for perennials that offer a winter interest? And do I have any deciduous stuff too? So it's kind of interesting to think about, but those do exist. And I don't know about your list, but my list, I've got kind of a mix going on.
Oh, mine's mostly woodies, but not all conifers.
That's okay. All right. Well, hit us up with your first plant on your list of a woody nature.
Okay. So this one is a fun one. I don't have this one yet, but I've seen it everywhere. And it is Carsten's Wintergold Mugo Pine. That's Pinus mugo, Carsten's Wintergold. And some sources just call it Carsten's. It was found by this guy called Erwin Carstens in Germany in the early 1980s. So this one has been around. A lot of people are familiar with mugo pines, and so you can sort of picture what it looks like. But in the winter, it turns like school bus yellow. and not like an ugly yellow. It's just like this warm, golden, glowing thing. And it stays pretty small. It stays like 1 to 2 feet tall over 10 years. It might get a little bigger than that, but it's this little glowing orb of gold. And then in the summer, it just looks like a normal mugo pine. And it's super hardy. Talk about something you could grow in Vermont. This one's hardy from zones 2 to 7.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's quite the range.
right. And it doesn't love the heat, so they say 2 to 7. But some sources say zone 8, and I think it depends on which part of zone 8 you're in. Because I saw, for example, it growing at Singing Tree Gardens in McKinleyville, California, and it was doing great. But it never gets super hot there. They're practically coastal, so it's just like nice, even temperatures all year. I do not think it would love to be in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Just guessing. But it's pretty easy care. It loves full sun. It likes consistently moist, well-drained soil, but pretty adaptable to just general regular garden conditions. And if anybody wants to see what this one looks like, I put a side-by-side photo in the program notes where you can see this in the winter. I took these 2 photos about 6 months apart at Whistling Gardens in Ontario. And so you can see it summer and winter side by side. And also some of the other conifers that change color, you can see those in the background too. So it's kind of a fun photo I thought I would share.
Oh, that's really cool. So in summer, Carol, does it lose some of that luminescent gold color and kind of fade more to green? Because I'm picturing like a straight species mugo pine, which is, pretty
That's
basic.
what it looks like in the summer. And you would just never guess that it had this golden color. To look at it in the summertime, it would just look like a normal mugo pine.
That's so cool. I feel like my only experience with this plant, other than seeing it in catalogs and perusing the Singing Tree gardens when I was there, was they have in the display gardens at the Northwest Flower and Garden Show, I think it was the Washington State Arboretum had put on a display garden, and Carsten's Gold was featured in that garden. It really did. That show takes place in February, so obviously these potted plants that they bring in to make the display gardens, it was colored up at that point. And it's weird though, because when you go into these, trade shows and flower shows, the lighting is kind of funky. So I couldn't tell if it was the lighting really making this thing look amazing. But from what it sounds like to you, it sounds like it's a school bus yellow sea urchin, for lack of a better.
That's a good description. Yeah. Yeah. Super fun. Just like, a surprise.
That is cool. Well, I'm gonna hop on the bandwagon with you with dwarf conifers, and just say, my caveat is, here's the thing: pick a really cool dwarf conifer, like one that's got cool coloring, one that does, something beyond just green, because they're expensive, folks. Dwarf conifers are pricey. They're probably one of the pricier plants that you'll purchase, and so I'm going on the blue spectrum, and this is Glauca Prostrata noble fir. So that's Abies procera Glauca prostrata, and that's zones 5 to 9. This little dynamo I purchased, I was trying to figure it out, I think it was 4 years ago, from Broken Arrow Nursery in Hamden, Connecticut, and they do a lot of kind of choice dwarf conifers. You go up and down their aisles there and just drool all over yourself. But this little guy just caught my attention, because at this point it's spring and it's glowing blue. I mean, blue spruce on steroids blue. But because it's a fir and Abies, it doesn't have those super, super pricky, needles to it. It's soft. and really compact, 2 feet tall by 1 to 3 feet wide, and that's over 15 years. So my guy right now is hanging tough at about 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet. You'll see the picture. I took it this morning in the snow on our show notes at finegardening.com. Go under the podcast tab and you'll see the show notes with the pictures of these plants. It's awesome. I mean, it's glowing in the winter. It just really is that vibrant blue color. And what a weird color sometimes to see in the garden. It's an unexpected color. For the rest of the year, it's pretty much a backbone evergreen for the bed that it's in. It gets outshone by the perennials that are surrounding it, but it becomes that focal point in winter. I will say, here's the thing. They're an investment, these little dwarf conifers. So make sure you water them the first year. I'm a really bad waterer. I am a person who chucks in a plant and goes, hey, it rains a lot in spring. No biggie. Make sure you water these ones. It's definitely worth it because most of the conifers do like that moist, well-drained soil to really do well. Full sun for this Glauca Prostrata noble fir, it really does like full sun. And to get that true blue color, you definitely want to have it in full sun. So again, that was Glauca Prostrata noble fir, and it's an Abies procera. All right, Carol, what's up next on your list?
So this one could have been one of my choices when we were talking about berries a couple episodes ago, but I have a lot of berry plants, and so I saved this one for the winter interest episode. It is red Sprite winterberry, Ilex verticillata, Nana, and so it has a different common name from its cultivar name, and you may see it under either one. Sometimes they just call it Nana instead of red Sprite. This one is super hardy too. It is hardy in zones 3 to 9, so pretty much anywhere in the continental United States you can grow it. And what I like about this one is it stays super small. So I got it last year, and it is for a spot that is under my husband's office windows. And he likes to spy on the neighborhood, and he sees every car that comes and goes in and out of the neighborhood from that window. And he's like, do not plant something that blocks my view. So
I'm just picturing him with his little binoculars,
Yep. He recognizes if a car is, that's not from the neighborhood. Anyway. So very important to keep his view open. So this little guy, it stays like 2.5, 3 feet tall and wide. But I think it gets bushier and better and makes more berries every year. And I love the look of these winter berries that have the berries on the bare branches. And the photo I took for the program notes, unfortunately, it still has the foliage. It was taken in November, and the foliage was still hanging on. And I neglected to take a photo after the foliage dropped and before the robins or whoever it was descended on these plants and picked every berry off when I was away after Christmas. But I mean, isn't it great that you can provide food for the little critters at a time when they really need it? So I do not begrudge them the berries. I'm just sad I didn't get a good photo because it was packed with berries. To get the berries, you absolutely have to have a male plant. And the one that I got to keep the ladies company is called Jim Dandy. And he gets a little bit taller, and the foliage looks the same. In the summer, they will blend in together. In the winter, you can see him standing a little taller and, looking out for the red sprites. But a nice, cute little grouping. And you can have one male plant will pollinate up to like 6 to 10 female plants, depending how far away they are from him. In nature, this one grows in wet, boggy areas, but it's pretty adaptable. And it will grow just fine in regular garden soil. It does like best. It likes moist, loamy, acidic soil, which is kind of what its natural conditions would be. but quite adaptable. It can grow in clay, it can grow in sand, as long as it has sufficient moisture. So a fun plant. I just, those little red berries are so cheerful, and at least they hung around until after the holidays.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like I have an unnamed cultivar of Ilex verticillata. I don't know. I think it's Berry Poppins. I'm not sure. Yeah, the tag's somewhere in the basement. But I am totally with you that some years I feel like those berries hang on for a while before, for me, it's the bluebirds, the overwintering bluebirds, that just go bananas on it, which is really cool because you have that bright blue bird on the red berries. But this year, the show hung on for us. It's right outside of our dining room window, and that's a bigger variety. And I looked out in January, and there were still berries on the winterberry. I loved it. I loved it. I thought it was so cool. I even tried to take a picture with my cell phone of the bluebird on the red berries, and it is a blurry mess. It looks like I didn't have my glasses on or something, but maybe I'll throw that in the show notes too. But yeah, great plant, great for wildlife, great for winter interest. Yeah, the only caveat I would say is that whole having to have a male thing. So I threw the male on the edge of my property, that ugly Uggo male. He's just like kind of hanging out on the woodland line, and it's quite a distance away, but still does the trick. I still get berries. So
I guess the bees can travel that far, right?
Yeah. Right, exactly. No need to put that, that ugly male up front. You can put him in the back row. So I'm going to talk about an arborvitae, which is so weird because honestly, guys, if this hadn't been a free sample plant that we got, there's no way in hell I would have planted this. I'm not an arborvitae fan. This is Fluffy. Cute name though, Fluffy Western Arborvitae, and that's Thuya plicata. It's a bunch of letters, which is its actual cultivar name. It's SMNTPGF. Who cares? It's fluffy and it's adorable. It's zones 5 to 8. I probably should have mentioned, I don't know if I did, my last plant, which was that ABs, was zones 5 to 9. But on to Fluffy. It came in, I already talked about, conifers are expensive. I really did want some evergreen presents in my gardens. I thought, well, what the hell? I'll plant this guy and see what it does. Its claim to fame is that it has a very feathery appearance, very fluffy, this fern-like texture to a pyramidal shaped arborvitae. And because it was a Western arborvitae, which are said to be more deer resistant, I figured let's give it a shot. I live on a wooded 5-acre lot. And so we've got football teams of deer that roam in and out. So far, I would say maybe 3 or 4 years in, they haven't touched it. And I'm not protecting it in any way, shape, or form either. So Fluffy gets 5 to 10 feet tall, 3 to 5 feet wide. And right now in my garden, I would say it's about 5 feet tall and maybe 3 feet wide. So it's on the smaller end. It's only been in the garden maybe 3 or 4 years. It has golden, beautiful foliage. It turns more of a greeny gold as summer progresses. But in the spring, that gold is really, really shocking. I haven't noticed a ton of sun scald on it either, which is, for a golden plant, you always worry about that in full sun. And this is, if it wants full sun and well-drained, lean soil. So, kind of bad soil. It burned only a little bit. So that was a bonus. But the thing that's really cool, aside from the winter or the winter interest and the deer resistance and all of that, is when the temperatures start to cool a little, this guy takes on kind of a bronzy orange cast to it. It really does do almost what you would expect from a lot of Caniscyparuses. It gets this, just bronzy, maybe a little purpley cast to it, which is really kind of surprising to me. And I thought, look at you, little boring arborvitae. You're actually doing something here. And, I'm talking about how pricey conifers and how pricey evergreens can be. This is an arborvitae. It's, I looked it up online. I think for a 2-gallon plant, it's $19.99, so it's on the less expensive side, and it kind of does what I need it to do. It's got a great shape. It doesn't require much, and the deer have left it alone. I've got a cool picture of the winter kind of coloring that it went to bronziness, again, that I took this morning. That'll be on the show notes. But again, that's fluffy Western arborvitae. So that's Thuya plicata and zones 5 to 8. Carol, do you have any arborvitaes?
No, I'm afraid to grow them because of the deer, but now I know there's one that's deer resistant. I might consider it.
Yeah. It's Thuya occidentalis, I think, is the one that's just like, you just might as well lay out for the deer as prime rib. But Thuya plicata, that Western arborvitae, holds up a little bit better. Nothing is truly deer resistant, though, right?
Yeah, if they're hungry enough, they will eat anything. Sure. So I have another conifer, and so it seems to be a little bit of a conifer heavy show, but winter interest. Yeah.
Sure.
This is one I forgot that I had. I went out yesterday and I was like, okay, what have I got that's a winter interest out here? And I found that this cute little Japanese umbrella pine that I had bought, 2-3 years ago, and it sort of blends into the summer landscape because it's pretty small. But in the winter, it stands out. So I saw it and I said, okay, you can be on the show.
You made the cut.
You made the cut. This one is wintergreen because, unlike a lot of the other Japanese umbrella pines, it doesn't really bronze out too much in the winter. It stays nice and green. So it's got this like good dark green color pretty much all year round. Although it is a little darker and a little bit bronzier in the winter. The species name, I am going to try to say it, is Triadopidus verticillata. That word verticillata, I think, means skinny leaves. So like the ilex, it has nice, skinny, strappy foliage in whorls that I guess somebody looked at and said, oh, that looks like an umbrella. Right, it's got a sort of a radiating pattern that looks like the inside of an umbrella. It stays nice and small. It gets maybe 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide in 10 years. It grows like 6 to 12 inches per year, so moderate growth rate. The straight species is slow growing, but in Japan and its native habitat, these trees can get like 60 feet tall. And they're very long lived. They can live for decades, without a lot of problems and not hard to grow at all. They like full sun, like a lot of these conifers, moist, acidic, well-drained soil, and they like plenty of organic matter. Any of these forest trees, they're just used to having that leaf litter feeding them year after year. And so that's the kind of conditions in the garden that we are trying to recreate. This one has a nice pyramid shape, and it adds a different texture than even some of the other conifers because that foliage is bigger and strappier. The needles are like 5 inches long, so you can kind of picture, how big that would make it. And for this one, I found this out through my research. There is a local connection. This was selected by someone named Dr. Sidney Waxman at the University of Connecticut in Storrs.
Mm-hmm.
And he found it in 1960 and named it in 1985. So this one has been around a while. But even though it's a Japanese cultivar, this one came from Storrs, Connecticut.
Yay, go Huskies. That my alma mater, guys. Sorry, had to give a shout out there. The Japanese umbrella pines are unreal, right? You go and you touch them and the needles are rubbery, or to me, they feel rubber or plasticky. Plastic makes it sound like they're not cool. So let's go with rubbery. It's the coolest non-conifer conifer that's out there, I think. Really, really cool. And those whorls too, it's almost like very, if you just take one little branch off and hold it up, it looks like a little Dr. Seuss tree, because it's got that little whirl thing going on. But Carol, can you say the cultivar name of that one again for me?
It is called wintergreen, and easy to remember because it stays green in the winter time.
Love it, love it. That's a good one. That is definitely on any umbrella tree, umbrella pine, excuse me, is on my list. I feel like that's something that needs to make its way into my garden. There's some really cool different varieties out there. But yeah, a lot of people get bummed out because they do this like kind of black, bronzy, purpley cast sometimes to the needle. So that's really cool that this one stays dark green. So let's mix it up. You want to do your next plant?
Sure. So the next one I have, also a woody, but this one is deciduous, is Primavera witch hazel. And that's a Hamamelis intermedia Primavera. So it is a cross, a hybrid between the Hamamelis japonica, which is native to Japan, and Hamamelis mollis, which is native to Western China. And so this hybrid is nice and small, 7 to 12 feet tall and wide. So if you are looking for a witch hazel that doesn't get like 20 feet tall and take over the whole garden, this is a really good one for that. Likes full sun to partial shade, moist, well-drained soil, kind of the standard, right? All plants like that. We don't have that everywhere, but this one you can make it work as long as you don't let it dry out too much. You can grow it in pretty average garden conditions. It has an upright habit that evolves into sort of a nice vase shape. When I saw it and the photograph that you'll see in the program notes, it was at the Toronto Botanical Garden in this sort of a small space between a building and a path. And so, the person that put it there was aware that this plant is not going to get too big because they put it somewhere where it would be a problem in both directions if it got too wide. So it stays nice and tight. And of course, the selling point are these like miraculous winter flowers. It blooms in February or March, and the flowers are the typical witch hazel with the little yellow ribbons coming out of like a maroon kind of calyx, and just cover the plant in this sunny yellow color at the time in the winter when we need it most. We don't have spring bulbs yet. It's like getting pretty depressing, and boom, you have something flowering on kind of a grand scale. So another one that's on my list is this one, which is Primavera witch hazel.
Oh, I'm so glad somebody did a witch hazel because I feel like you can't go a winter interest episode without mentioning witch hazel because that's exactly, you nailed it. They bloom at that point in winter where the winter blues are on point. Everybody is in the depths of, seasonal affective disorder, like it's just bad. And then all of a sudden, bam, it starts blooming. I have a purple blooming witch hazel, which I love and adore, but I honestly, I don't think it's as impactful as a yellow blooming like Primavera witch hazel because it is that yellow against that dreary, winter scape is just bar none.
Imagine the two together, though. I think you need a yellow one to put near it.
My paycheck is dwindling throughout this episode here. I need an umbrella pine now, and I need a Primavera witch hazel. All right, so witch hazel, classic, total classic. Another classic I feel like for winter that we'd be remiss without mentioning is red twig dogwood. I feel like we got to talk about red twig dogwood. And the one that I have in my garden is actually Arctic Fire red osier dogwood. Now, red twig dogwood is this common name that's thrown out for actually 3 different species of Cornus. So, you have Cornus sericea, you have Cornus stolonifera, which is what this one is, Cornus stolonifera pharaoh. That's Arctic fire. It's zones 2 to 7. So again, hey, zone 2, what's up? You guys tell us all the time in all of our little emails that we never represent you, but today is your day. And Arctic fire's claim to fame is that it's just a bit more red. When you start getting into some of the red twig dogwoods, the straight species, love for the straight species, but a lot of them tend to get muddy. They don't really have that bright on fire red color. Arctic fire, I mean, the name says it all, right? It lights up. The other thing that I loved about this one and the reason that I planted it is, unlike some red twig dogwoods that'll top out at 10, 12 feet, this guy only gets 5 feet. 5 feet tall, 3 feet wide, maybe 4 feet wide. I already said it's, brighter than what you might be envisioning as a red twig dogwood in your head. It likes full sun to partial shade. I have it in partial shade. It likes moist, well-drained soil. Again, it's one of these woodland plants that if it had its druthers, it would be in this really rich, humus-rich soil with, maybe a little bit of on the boggy edge of a wetland area. I have it in lean, dry, well-drained soil. So the exact opposite. I was good about watering when it initially was planted many years ago. I feel like this was, 6 or 7 years ago that I planted this. It's doing fine. It's doing fine, folks. So, don't always read into what the soil conditions are. Sometimes it makes a difference. With this plant, it doesn't. It's got nondescript green, kind of lance-shaped leaves. It gets adorable white umbel flowers that kind of emerge in the late spring, early summer. Pollinators love it, of course, because of that kind of open, umbel-y shape to it. But then, the real show is honestly when the leaves drop in fall and these red stems are just lighting up the fall garden. And it really does. It looks really, really nice in fall with all those typical, orange and reds and brilliant gold colors. But then in winter, it holds that color. It is a giant exclamation point because that's really its shape. It is vase shape, but maybe a little bit more narrow. So it looks like this giant red exclamation point. Once it matures, so I would say about 3 years in, and you've got a pretty bulked up, good sized plant, prune out 1/3 of the stems right to the ground every year. So 1/3 yearly, prune those stems out, because with most of the colorful twigged dogwoods, as well as salixes, the willows, the colorful twigged willows, the brightest colors are on the new growth. So you're going to get the most color, the most red from Arctic fire, this dogwood, on the new growth. So, if you're pruning it out 1/3 per year, it won't look all funky and misshapen. You basically, kind of indiscriminately prune in the middle. So I love this plant. And I'm going to get a bunch of hate mail, but I kind of chose this plant to talk about not only because of its winter interest, but because of the pairing that I have it with. So my 4th plant is Ice Dance Sedge. Now, I hear you. We were at a trade show a couple of years ago and somebody told me, stop talking about Ice Dance Sedge on the podcast. We're over it. I get it. I understand. It's a utilitarian sedge. It's Carex ice dance. It's zones 4B to 9. It's a tough plant. It's kind of like the Stelladora daylily of sedges. You can plant it anywhere. Partial to full shade. I've got it in partial shade. Moist, well-drained soil. I have it in lean, dry soil. It does just fine. It's evergreen. So in the winter, the strappy green and white variegated blades look very, very cool. And where I put it was all around the base of that Arctic fire dogwood. So it kind of obscures the bare legs of the dogwood, especially during the spring and summer season when you really can't see those red stems all that much. So it's hiding those bare legs a bit. And that's because it gets to be about 1.5 to 2 feet tall and wide. So, it's kind of giving you that bulk around it. But in the winter, it looks so cool. Now, this was completely by chance. I was just trying to find a place to spread this sedge out because I had so many of them. So I planted it around the dogwood, and now what ends up happening is here in winter, and you'll see a photo on our show notes, it's this fluffy ornamental evergreen grass, kind of forms a circle, and then that red twig dogwood, like a firework, shoots out of the middle of the sedge. And it's such a cool combo. That was completely unplanned, but I love it so, so, so much. I do want to say, for those of you who are sick of hearing about ice dance sedge, a good replacement plant that's on the newer side is called Feather Falls sedge, and that's Carex ETCRX01. That is also zones 4B to 9. It's a slightly larger sedge, so you're gonna cover up a bit more of those bare legs. It gets to be sometimes 2.5 to 3 feet tall, like a little bit bigger, and a thinner blade to it, a really, really fluffy, beautiful texture. And I just think that would be a great replacement, Feather Falls sedge, to the ice dance that I used around the base of that red twig dogwood. It would just be spectacular. So when I get to the point where I'm ready to rip out some of that ice dance, I think that's the replacement that I will go with. And also evergreen. So, you like that evergreen perennial. I think that the one thing I will say about the sedge is, although it, holds its own through the winter, come spring, it browns out a bit. So I just give it the hedgehog haircut. I just kind of buzz it back so it looks like it's, this little buzz cut, and it sprouts back every single year very, very quickly. It doesn't look awkward in the garden for all that long, and you're back to the beginning again with fresh new foliage.
How early do you need to do that to make sure you don't cut the new growth?
I think it's pretty forgiving because I have done it several weeks. I've done it as early as March, when there's no threat of it getting, any more snow. I think that's the big thing. You don't want the snow kind of settling in the crown. That would kind of rot it out. So when we're past the threat of actual snow, I cut it. I've even cut it as far into the beginning of May because I forgot and it's already starting to bloom. At that point, you're going to sacrifice blossoms. And by blossoms, I mean these ugly little brown cigar looking things that shoot up out of the plant. For me, that was not a problem, but it was kind of a bummer when I waited that long, because then it went through that awkward hedgehog phase when the rest of the garden was looking really nice. So I was kind of regretting that. So I would say anywhere through March into April would be the best time to give it that little haircut, buzz it back. How do you feel about sedges, Carol?
I love them. And I can tell you that even if you don't cut them back, they will push that new growth.
Yes.
Yeah.
It really just, it covers over the brown, right?
Yeah. The older foliage just sort of adds volume, but it's underneath the new stuff. So you can get away with not cutting it back, but it sounds like cutting it back will make it look better. So I may try that this year.
All right, report back. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to talk about ways to combat the winter blues.
I think you'll agree that it was lovely to hear about the plants that warm Carol and Danielle's hearts in winter. And yes, it would be nice to look out my kitchen window and see a small witch hazel tree in full bloom this month. But dare I say, I can think of several other things that would help me combat the winter blues a bit more effectively than a plant with winter interest. Like a tropical vacation to the Caribbean, perhaps. There I could see scores of plants putting on a show, not just a scant few struggling to keep their heads above the snowbank. I could bury my feet in the warm white sand, take a swim in the warm turquoise sea, and soak up the warm golden sun. That, my friends, is what I call peak winter interest. Alas, travel is not in the cards currently for a number of reasons. So my plan instead will be to crank up the heat in my house, throw on a pair of short trousers and one of my signature Hawaiian-themed shirts, and mix up a delicious tropical drink, topped with a tiny umbrella, of course. Then, when I stare out my kitchen window at the 2 feet of snow that fell in New England last night, I won't be bothered that I don't see a witch hazel blooming or a white sandy beach. Oh, well, maybe.
So I guess Peter's not like us, you know? He doesn't use plants to combat the winter blues. Sounds like he's more food motivated.
Well, I am also food motivated. Food and plants.
I guess it's good to be both, right? Well, I'm very excited about this expert testimony because if there was ever an expert to talk on winter interests, we have someone from what state, Carol?
Montana. This is Kielian DeWitt, and she is from the Bitterroot Valley in Montana, where I have been in the summer, but I was so curious what it would be like in the winter.
Right? What does somebody from Montana consider winter interest? All right, let's see what she's got to say.
My name is Kielian DeWitt, and I garden in the Bitterroot Valley of Montana. I have had an interest in gardening since walking through my grandmother's and mother's cottage gardens at the age of 5 and marveling at their old-fashioned beds and fascination with plants. I'm lucky to be following in their masterful footsteps. I am a master gardener, have a master's degree in environmental science, and I'm currently the president of the Bitterroot Secret Garden Tour, a local nonprofit organization that annually donates all ticket sales revenue to charity. The Bitterroot Valley is a narrow valley section between the Bitterroot Mountain Range and the Sapphire Mountains. We enjoy a relatively warm climate for Montana with a USDA hardiness zone of 5B, except for that occasional minus 15-degree night. Because of that occasional freezing dip in temperature, I plan the majority of my garden for Zone 4 with some experimental microclimate gardens at 5B and even 6. The valley floor is protected from major mountaintop snowfalls, so we typically get less than 24 inches of snowfall per year, and we stay usually above 0-degree temperatures in the wintertime. Since this segment of Let's Argue About Plants discusses winter interest in the garden, I thought I'd start with the obligatory choice of evergreens for winter scenes. Bosnian pine, Latin name Pinus heldreckii, is one of my all-time favorites. It is listed as a Zone 5 tree. The cultivar compact gem is slow-growing at only 6 to 10 inches per year. It's considered a dwarf species, and it has a mature height of about 12 feet high and 8 feet wide. It is disease and pest resistant, and even browsing deer here on the ranch tend to stay away from nibbling on branches and bough tips. It really does have a beautiful shape with whorled, upward curving branches, lovely, glossy, dark green colored needles, and it has an airy placement of boughs. So if you're looking for a peekaboo tree, this is the one. It tolerates poor soil, but requires excellent drainage and prefers cooler temperatures. Now, I've read that it doesn't do well above 6,000 feet, so those at nosebleed altitude should be aware. I've seen a few websites that suggest this tree is a Zone 6 and grows taller than 12 feet, but my 14-year-old specimens are topping out at 10 feet so far, so I'm pretty happy with them. An added bonus with the Bosnian is its bluish-purple cones that are a kick to view during winter walks. I talked to 2 of my favorite Bitterroot Valley gardeners about their winter interest plants, and both Betsy and Nina suggested red-twig dogwoods. Some dogwoods can be somewhat boring during the summer, and green leaves are their only forte, but ivory halo, Latin name Cornus alba bellhollow, has a nice white variegation outlining light green foliage that adds this pretty splash of light contrast in the garden in spring and summer. Ivory halo boasts gorgeous red fall colors and bright red stems in winter. It's listed as Zone 3 to 7 and grows 5 to 6 feet tall and wide. When the snow starts to melt and treasures beneath the drifts are revealed, hellebores and creeping thyme shine. Even in the dead of winter, creeping mother of thyme, Latin name Thymus serpillum, stays evergreen. It's hardy to Zone 4 and spreads relatively quickly into a carpet of gray-green in winter. It has beautiful red or purple blossoms that cover the plant in spring and medium green leaves in summer. Thyme is wonderfully deer resistant, and its hardiness belies its delicate look. I'm actually toying with the idea of replacing sections of my front yard grass with beds of thyme. Because it is a walkable ground cover, light foot traffic doesn't hinder its beauty. It grows to about 3 inches high or so and is very attractive to bees. Oh, and if you buy a container of mother of thyme for your garden, split it into 4 sections for 4 different plants. It will spread rapidly and fill garden beds even quicker. Betsy's winter favorite is Lenten rose True Love, Latin name Helleborus. Hellebores are evergreen and peep out of snow drifts whenever there is a melt. True Love is hardy through zones 4 to 9 and has these beautiful, large, doubly rich maroon flowers. It prefers partial to full shade, like most hellebores, and well-drained moist soil is required. It really is easy to grow, and it displays a real pretty shade of green with dark, glossy leaves. Lenten roses are virtually disease and pest-free, but keep an eye out for slugs and aphids. It will grow well under trees or large shrubs, and it naturalizes pretty easy. Another favorite perennial is hydrangeas. Betsy and I like to leave the blossoms on our hydrangeas for a golden spark of color in winter. I planted 8 hydrangea paniculata bobo near my front porch, and the color they bear in winter sun is absolutely glorious. Bobo is a dwarf and grows to about 36 inches high and 3 feet wide, and is hardy in zones 3 to 8. Bobo blooms on new wood, so I can leave the spent blossoms on until late winter when pruning doesn't affect spring blooms. They start out with a pure white blossom and turn blush pink as autumn days get cooler. Bobo is trouble-free and provides pretty dried blossoms for winter flower arrangements. I add some of the red twig dogwoods for a delightful red gold winter arrangement. I know that I'm limited to 4 of my favorite plants for winter interest, but I just have to mention one more idea. Nina loves garden art in her flower beds during winter. Art can be as colorful and as elegant as the glass spears Jay Sifford, a friend and excellent landscape designer, lent me a photo of in his garden art, or as whimsical as bowling ball spiders wrapped in barbed wire. But even large boulders, tree trunks, stumps, stepping stones, fences, and found objects offer their own form of garden interest. Try placing evergreen trimmings in empty planter boxes and highlight with big sugar pine cones, willow or dogwood branches, yet another vote for red twig dogwoods, and dried seed pods can fill out your display. So I'm sure I could go on for another few days, but these are some of my favorite ideas that enhance and add enjoyment, color, and delight to winter white scenes.
Carol, so cool that Kielian mentioned basically a dead plant that provided winter interest, right?
Right? Not dead though, right? It's just dormant.
Just dormant, that's correct.
Just dormant. Yeah.
That's correct. And those, I've never thought about it, but yeah, I'm looking outside. I never trimmed off my panicle hydrangea blossoms, and they look really cool for winter interest.
I love when the blooms come off and blow across the snow like tumbleweeds.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun.
That is, for a split second, we feel it. The temperatures don't feel like the Southwest, but at least the tumbleweeds do.